Yeah, let me share my screen.
Okay.
Hey y'all, welcome to our presentation. We'll get this started in a couple minutes. We'll just allow a couple of folks to trickle in. And we'll give it one more minute. It's really awesome to see so many different people showing up for this. We're really excited. You guys are in store for a really powerful presentation. Before we get started, like, please feel free. I'll do my best that if I see a hand raised, if something piques your interest, as the Steinberg Heart team is going through all of their great research, raise your hand and we can do comments and questions during the presentation. We do want to make this interactive. We know that there's a lot of materials advocates and experts in their own right. So please, make this interactive, make it fun. We don't want this to just be talking heads. I think it's really powerful when we all come together on these things. So don't be shy. And if you have questions, please throw them. Please throw them in the appropriate place and we'll get to them. But don't be shy about raising stuff as we get to it. And in the spirit of time, I think we've got a pretty good amount of folks on. So thank you again for your time, spending an hour with us to talk about a really important topic and taking action on a really important topic. So we'll be talking about eliminating vinyl in the built environment, specifically getting into the nitty-gritty of how do we start getting this bad stuff out, not just talking about it, but taking action on our projects. How do we talk about it to our clients? How do we get all of our teams on board? A little bit background about me. I'll be playing moderator for this amazing panel. I'm a sustainability engineer at Borough-Happold, also a Bloomberg fellow at Johns Hopkins University, and I consider myself a climate and environmental activist, including getting groups of engineers out to show up in solidarity. So I'll be trying to throw some radical bombs in there to like get the conversation started with y'all. So it's enough about me. On the next slide, just a quick overview of my background. I work for Borough-Happold as an engineer. I've been with the company for 10 years. I've got experience on some of the Living Building Challenge projects where we really were able to dig into vinyl. I've really Borough-Happold has also had a just label for quite some time, and I'd really recommend that any of the folks who are thinking about materials, environmental justice, push their companies to going after, social impact certifications like just, and making sure that they're holding, their companies, their internal projects to this, things like net zero and social impact. It's not just about our clients, it's about us as the AEC ecosystem. And one quick, ask for any folks here. I'm also part of the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg Fellowship, which is a fully paid master and doctorate program trying to get folks not in the public health industry into that subject. So if there's anyone out there, thinking about going back into academia, thinking about, diving deep into this topic, please let me know, please reach out. We really want to get more architects, engineers, designers into this space. So enough about me. Next slide. And I just really wanted to set the idea of, how sustainability has evolved, for the past 10 years, where we used to only just think about, operational carbon in an EUI. That was sort of, doing the lead checkbox activity. We're moving on from that. That was business. This is business as usual now. And then the next slide, it's been really amazing that we have such a huge, groundswell of folks thinking about whole life carbon, embodied carbon, mass timber, decarbonizing steel. That's really great. It's really exciting, and there's so much momentum behind this. And then I think on the next slide, and one more, really, the kind of the next frontier is this circular economy, thinking about the onset of emissions. If we're dig in a giant basement, what is the carbon emissions of that? What's the impact? And all of these things are super important. And, and I do know that as sustainability and design professionals, you guys are keeping this all in the back of your brain. So don't forget it as we go through, this presentation, that all of this stuff still matters, right? And the next slide. But what we're really here today is talking about the health and equity impacts, across the life cycle, both upstream and downstream. It's not just the embodied carbon story. It's not just having efficient building. We as designers have so much power and influence over the health impacts across our communities, especially those, the inequities that we face, whether it's those who are exposed to the fracking from hydrocarbons to make the petrochemicals that go into vinyl. We'll be talking about some stories you've seen in the news about, how transportation of, these toxic chemicals can impact communities, but even on the very end, right? The recycling, the disposal of these materials and how they impact. So it's not just a health and wellness conversation about our occupants, as important that it is, we have to see this full picture. The next slide. And really, I think what the group here is going to be doing such an excellent job. What I hope all of you guys are doing is, as important it is to really get into the metrics and the ins and outs, is keeping this a human story, right? Who are the humans that this is impacting? How can we bring untold stories, previously underrepresented communities, bring their truth out and bring our truth out, right? For all of us, I think we have personal connection to materials and environmental justice and health. So, for me, it's my brother's a firefighter, and firefighters are exposed to tons of this, vinyl, especially burning, and the what it means to his health and to his little girls. That what if their daddy inhales that toxic smoke? So that's my story, right? That's the story of somebody I love, but I know everybody here on this call has that human story, and I think we'll be diving into that too. On the final couple of slides. We're all thinking about ESG and net zero and scope 1, 2, and 3 and all this other stuff. And how can we really start tying these conversations that we're about to have on vinyl to these kind of macro economic movements to help our clients think about this? In the last slide. And how does that really help us get into this just transition? So we want to be thinking about all of this, in the background, for your questions, as we go through this really incredible presentation that's really about taking action, right? Not just a bunch of pretty graphics like I have, but let's put pedal to the metal and change things in our industry. So I think today, we've got incredible, you can go to that slide, incredible lineup of just badass women. I think I can say badass at AIA, right? We've got Alyson, who is director interior design for Steinberg Hart, who's really been leading this and bringing this into her work on everyday projects. We've got Javaria, interior designer, also at Steinberg Hart, really working on the research, integrating this. And then we also have Adrienne, who's the chair of materials co-lab for Steinberg Hart. So their full bios are on the website. I can read them to you, but I think you really, they're going to tell their story and how they've come to this work and what it really means to them. So take it away, ladies. I'll be moderating and just looking out for questions. I might just be calling out to you guys, but I'm really excited for this. And thank you so much for everybody's time and attention.
Thanks, Kathleen. So I did want to preface this to give a little overview of, why we put this presentation together. Javaria, Alyson, and I are part of the Material Collab group at Steinberg Hart. We have initiated the Sustainable Materials Initiative within the firm just recently. And so this really was curated to help educate the designers within our firm. So a lot of materials that we're talking about are and the ones that we're looking at as alternatives are ones that really work with our projects. So there might be other alternatives that might work with yours, but these are kind of the attributes that we're looking at when we look at, how can we replace vinyl with other materials? So starting with a little bit of a fun fact, true or false, one of the benefits to vinyl is that vinyl can be recycled into safer products. False. When vinyl is recycled, all the hazardous materials that were previously in there essentially make it into the new product. So it's just because you see recycled vinyl does not mean it's any safer. So this is a AIA accredited course. We'll be focusing on eliminating unhealthy materials. We'll touch briefly on vinyl's chemical makeup and the manufacturing process. But the bulk of the content's really going to be focused on what are the alternate healthy materials to use and how to avoid regrettable substitutions. And then at the end, we'll talk about how do you engage with stakeholders. So here is the course outline. We'll start with an overview, talk about how this impacts us with, in real life situations. Then we'll dive into specific materials with low slope roofing, window frames, wall covering, flooring. We got a bulk of information to share with you. And then the last part is, how do you have this conversation both with your clients and your material reps, even with their designers that you're working with. So let's start with what is vinyl. Invented in the 1920s. It's also known as polyvinyl chloride, PVC, as you'll hear pretty often. It's the third most widely produced synthetic polymer, and it's the most versatile. When we gave this presentation a while back, it was actually the second most widely used. So it's good to see that it's coming down in the tiers. So that's nice to see. One of the reasons PVC is used so widely is it has two basic forms, rigid and flexible, and the ability to take those two shapes really lends itself to a lot of different products. So everything listed on the left, that's not even every single product that you can find that's made out of vinyl. Yes, we see it in a lot of our building products, but we also see it in our day-to-day products, cleaning materials, inflatable materials. So you'll start to see it a little bit more everywhere. Why do we use vinyl? It's easy to manufacture. It's durable. At least that's what they say. And it's incredibly cheap. And that's the thing that's always hardest to beat is it's so cheap. And it sounds really familiar to asbestos. Asbestos was banned in 1907 and 1970, and it was still used. It was widely available. It doesn't combust. And again, it's cheap. So the vinyl we view as the next asbestos, and so it's one of the reasons we're focusing on it so heavily. Why are we studying vinyl? It's not a healthy building material. It's been stated by the U.S. Green Building Council. And as part of our job as architects and designers is to focus on the health and safety of our occupants and our environment. And so we need really not just look at the, structural aspects of a building, but we need to look at the materials and the exposure to toxins as well. We did want to share this is that, we are not alone in this uphill battle to fight vinyl. The hazards of vinyl have been inspired throughout the world. You'll see legislation happening in the US with Boston, New York, San Francisco, Seattle. They all have legislation limiting the purchase of vinyl-based products. In European countries, you'll see that that's also been eliminated in some of them. And huge corporations like Apple, Johnson & Johnson, Microsoft, they've all adopted a vinyl reduction or elimination policies. So we're not alone in this fight. You'll see this change happening, and all we got to keep doing is having the conversation and trying to figure out ways to avoid vinyl and do it together. So some quick findings on vinyl. Vinyl, of course, places an enormous environmental and health burden. It has human health risks. And frankly, there's environmentally friendly alternatives that do exist and that can actually outperform vinyl. So vinyl-based products we see as unsustainable, unsafe, and we do not recommend at any capacity. True or false? Reformulated vinyl, such as the ones that removed lead and cadmium-based plasticizers, is safe to specify. False. Reformulated vinyl still requires hazardous chlorine gas and release dioxins throughout its life cycle. And the plasticizers that it gets replaced with, or what replaces the plasticizers, we still don't know if that's safe. So when you see a manufacturer saying, well, our vinyl's reformulated, you need to see proof that, what they're replacing with is not a regrettable substitution.
So you know, I think one of the news stories and current events that probably folks on this call are the most familiar with recently was this environmental tragedy that occurred in East Palestine, Ohio, a little less than a year ago now. So I think all of us sort of remember seeing these images on the news or on social media of this just horrible plume of you know, black gas over, you know, a pretty sort of rural area in Ohio, and thinking, you know, what is this? And where did it come from? And, you know, this is not right. This is not what we're used to seeing. And that's because this was no ordinary train derailment. This train that derailed, multiple cars were carrying the gas vinyl chloride. And I think, you know, that is a part of the story that did get overlooked a little bit. You know, it was very evident that, you know, it was carrying a solution or a material that was toxic and that was carcinogenic. But that material is vinyl chloride, and it's a very, very, very common you know, gas that makes its way into many of the products that we interact with on a daily basis. You go to the next slide. So some quick facts about this derailment. Because of the incident that occurred, you know, this gas was actually needed to slow burn over several days in order to avoid the risk of an even larger, more tragic explosion. And then it was, you know, considered to be safe for the state of Ohio. If this had occurred in California, for instance, the dioxin levels emitted actually would have been 14 times higher than the threshold allowed in California. So that gives you an idea of really how bad this tragedy was. Residents in the area reported headaches, rashes, burning lips and eyes, breathing issues. It's estimated that over 43,000 animals died due to this derailment. So I think that some of us are familiar with some of those images that we saw of fish, you know, dying, livestock dying, people reporting that their household pets were dying simply from breathing in the air or drinking the drinking water in the area. And that's really because of these two, you know, items that you see on the right here. And Kathleen even alluded to some of them. You know, these dioxins are toxic. They cause cancer. They can cause reproductive health problems. They're toxic for any mammal, including humans. And they also have developmental concerns as well. And then breathing in that smoke from this material is incredibly toxic. You know, it's really one of the long-lasting effects that we see as a result of 9/11 as well, is firefighters breathing in these toxins that were burned from the building materials at the trade centers. Go to the next slide. And so we have seen, you know, all of these, you know, tragic stories come out. The New York Times has done some really great reporting. I think somebody mentioned that in the chat as well. The Guardian actually posted a story about this today. This is not a tragedy that's ended. And the issue now in the area and throughout the state of Ohio is where the waste from the site is being pumped, and now that being a concern in neighboring communities. And this is, you know, a tragedy that we have been able to point to clients and say, hey, do you remember, you know, that big plume of smoke that you saw in that tiny town in Ohio that everyone was really concerned about? Well, that material was actually the material that goes into this building product, you know, that your developer is recommending you use. And no, putting it in your building isn't going to have the same effect. But what we talk about with vinyl is that the additives, the really toxic ingredients from vinyl, the way that the chemical makeup of vinyl works is that they don't chemically bond to the material. All of those nasty, yucky chemicals, they actually leach out of the material into the indoor air quality, especially when exposed to sunlight, to heat. And so that's really why these health concerns and these environmental concerns are so important. So that's just a little bit of context for all of you on how this topic is affecting us currently.
Thanks, Alyson. Let's talk about roofing. So this is a image from the Healthy Building Network's Home Free Ranking of Roof System. This is a resource we go to a lot, and I hope you guys, leverage as well. And it gives you just an easy overview ranking of, healthy building materials in green, unhealthy building materials on the bottom with red. You can see PVC is in the orange zone. And so we would look at the top 3 as alternates for our roofing materials. We won't be talking about EPDM because, like I said, this was really geared towards Steinberg Hart projects. And we do a lot of our work in the West Coast. And so EPDM is really not appropriate for the type of work we do. So we'll focus on TPO and PVC. So when we're talking about low slope roofing, we want to prefer TPO roofing over PVC. We also want to prefer that it mechanically fastened or ballasted over fully adhered because the glues can have toxins as well. And then if you're specifying a fully adhered roof, check to see if water-based adhesives can be used. And then avoid products containing halogenated flame retardants, which EPDMs do. Prefer products with full disclosure and content with HPDs or declare. I did want to talk a little bit about the TPO versus PVC in terms of cost and warranty. We're seeing that those two are pretty competitive, and actually TPO we are seeing to be a little bit cheaper than PVC. So it's a little bit easier to get that, convincing your client to go with a more economical material that still performs just as well. And then in terms of the warranty, they're also both comparable with a 20-year warranty.
And I would just say here, if from my experience, one of our Living Building Challenge projects that we did in Santa Monica with Frederick Fisher's, we used a TPO roof to meet the red list for LBC, but also so we could collect rainwater. And there are multiple different, you don't have the sole spec that work, to kind of, this also helps you with your water story too. Like you don't want to use PVC as your roofing material for that. TPO is the way to go. So we've seen it used on office buildings as well.
Thanks, Kathleen. Okay, quickly talk about window frames. So the window types, vinyl, aluminum, fiberglass, those are the 3 we're going to focus on. Wood and wood composites, not typically used on, large scale development projects. So we'll focus on the top 3. On the right, you see the product attributes that we'd like to focus and weigh against. We'll just kind of touch on a couple as we look through the different options. But just to understand that we are looking specifically at the frames only. Overall performance, of course, you need to consider the glazing and other items there that affect the performance of the window. So vinyl window frames, why is it specified? Number 1 reason, affordability, it's cheap. It is low maintenance. The thermal performance is fairly good. Design pressure loads also performs pretty well. In terms of sustainability, like we said, it's toxic. It doesn't break down. The life expectancy is pretty good. It's 20 to 40 years. And then in terms of the variety of options, you can get custom colors on it, but what we always tend to see is the aesthetic of it is always bulky, and you can't do large windows. You have to mull them together, and those are sources where you can have water penetration or air infiltration. And so there are some downsides into profile. So we compete with it. Let's look at aluminum. We know aluminum has an incredible variety of design options, and it's recyclable, so it's sustainable. It also has a pretty good life expectancy if it's kept up fairly well, but it does cost a lot more than vinyl. We do know that. In terms of its design options, it has more you can have more custom colors, you can have larger window sizes, and you can get a more contemporary look. And then you can see the frames on the bottom. In terms of the quality of the thermal performance, you can really vary between not having a thermal break or starting to introduce thermal breaks or increasing them to improve your performance. Fiberglass is probably the one we recommend the most within our firm because we do a lot of development work. It's not much more expensive than vinyl windows, and it outperforms it. It's low maintenance. It meets all these same product attributes that we're competing against with vinyl. You can also, because it's a rigid product, you can also get larger window spans, which is great. fiberglass is made out of sand, just like the glass in the window pane. And so because those are both ultimately made up of the same material, they expand and contract at the same rate. And so you're not seeing a compromised thermal break like you would see in a vinyl window. Here's a quick overview of comparisons of all the different attributes. Like I said, fiberglass is a little bit more expensive, but you can see it just meeting the same types of performance that vinyl has. And then we also did a detailed comparison. This is really kind of a cheat sheet that we were sharing with our firm. Not gonna dive into it, but it's something to have as a guide if you need talking points to your client.
So next we'll talk about wall covering. We've all seen vinyl wall covering, particularly in areas where you need something a little bit more durable on the wall, which is why it's most often specified. There is a long-term savings over paint in terms of cost, particularly in areas that are high traffic. It's flame retardant. It does have a color fastness to light that some other wall coverings don't have. It can be easily cleaned. And then of course it is seemingly unlimited in terms of color, design, and texture options. One thing that we point out about wall covering is that vinyl is incredibly closed textured. It is not, it doesn't have a breathable sort of material content. And so what does often happen is that you can find mold growing beneath the vinyl surface, particularly in spaces with temperature and humidity fluctuations, anywhere where you might have water, a restroom, in certain climates. And we have seen numerous liability lawsuits regarding vinyl wall covering. We do not recommend vinyl wall covering for this reason as well, from a functional perspective. In terms of wall covering alternatives, there are seemingly endless alternatives for wall covering, particularly in terms of durability. And we've sort of outlined here, you know, what all of the different options are, from the most sort of practical alternate to vinyl to still, you know, really ranking kind of last in terms of sustainability. So really at the top, in terms of sustainability, you know, you're going to find very similar attributes between a bio-based textile, cellulose, wool, bamboo, or wood-based wall coverings. Some of your differences might be that depending on where you're located or where your projects are located. For instance, the majority of wool, which is a very incredibly sustainable material, the majority of wool comes from New Zealand, which in some cases is very far from a lot of our projects. You know, we've also highlighted some particular manufacturers that we have great relationships with and have worked really well in the past with. And Carnegie Zorel is an incredibly durable bio-based textile that can be applied as a wall covering. It is virtually indestructible. We first installed this material at the Rainbow Room at 30 Rockefeller Center 50 years ago, and it's still there and looks as good. It was one of the first installations of this material ever in the United States. You know, cork is also an incredibly sustainable material. It's durable, it's self-healing. Of course, the downside is that cork is really only grown in the Mediterranean. So you have to also weigh that with and the geography of where the material is located with the sustainability of the material as well.
Alyson, if you go back one, I really love this slide because as somebody who does a lot of embodied carbon work, these are also the recommendations that I would make, right? These are all super low embodied carbon. They're all bio-based. As a sustainability engineer, like if I'm working with you on a project, like when is the time that we come together to be like, hey, you know, interior design folks, can we start talking about not doing vinyl and doing one of these bio-based? Can you guys kind of talk about like the process there of like, when you see this come up in projects? It's really interesting for me to understand that.
So it's different depending on the project typology, right? Because there are some projects where you are working with folks who know exactly what they want or have used, the same materials on many different projects. And then there are other projects where, they really look to, the architecture team to make those recommendations. When it's the latter, we never start by proposing we never propose final products ever, right? And so on those types of projects, we're usually playing more of a defense strategy, right? If vinyl does come up as a suggestion, we will try and steer the conversation away from that. We'll bring up some of these topics at the point at which it comes up. On projects where we might be working with developers who have only ever used, the same vinyl flooring or same vinyl wall covering, usually we start that conversation by asking, well, what are the attributes of that material that you really like? Why has it worked for you? Is it cost, which is often what you'll hear? Is it durability? Those identifying those targets for why those materials have been the go-to are really important, because if it's cost, we can start to identify some materials that might be more equitable in terms of cost. If it's durability, then we might have a separate conversation about, well, is this the most durable material? Can we suggest some alternates that might actually be more durable or perform better? And so that's where we would sort of start the conversation. Again, I think we usually try and approach projects with an optimistic view, right? That we're going to come in recommending the best, most sustainable materials based on the knowledge that we have at the time. However, we do know that, sometimes clients know exactly what they want. And at that point, that's when we'll have the conversation with them. I did see a question in the chat about why paper was so far down. And so I did want to address that. The real concern that we have with paper is the adhesives that are used on the wall to actually adhere the paper. It's very difficult to find sustainable adhesives to use paper wall covering. And often we find that paper wall coverings now are really made they're not really harvested from FSC certified forests. They often now come from China, where forests are not managed. And it's actually becoming a little bit more difficult to find pure paper wall coverings. Cellulose is a really great alternative to paper that most traditional wall covering manufacturers are now using because it is cheaper to produce. It comes from plants. It has, it's more durable than traditional paper wall coverings. And there's a greater variety of adhesives that can be used for those wall coverings. And they come in a variety of patterns and textures as well. And then this is that material spotlight on Zarel, a material that we use often. It's red list chemical free, it's plant-based, and again, it is a virtually indestructible product. And then this is a spotlight on cellulose wall covering. DesignTex is a manufacturer that has really excelled in taking cellulose materials and transforming them into a variety of patterns and textures. And they also will do custom wall coverings for you with this material. Lastly, we use a wool material called Acousticord. It's actually made from goat hair. So it is made in Ireland, which again, depending on your project location, might be less feasible for you. But wool is an incredibly sustainable product. It's acoustic, it's naturally fire retardant. And then of course it has those static dissipative properties as well. And then again, highlighting a manufacturer for wood where all of their wood is FSC certified. And they actually have a technique that it yields a higher gain from trees than a traditional veneer would as well. And then lastly, cork. and here's the summary comparing all of those materials.
So moving into vinyl flooring, there is a multitude of reasons why it's typically specified, and many of them are pretty similar to what Alyson and Adrienne have mentioned. One of them, it's generally easy to clean, and it's worth noting that when it comes in contact with like standard household cleaning products, it off-gases VOCs that the vinyl has inside and further reduces the indoor air quality of the space. Another like major reason that LVT is such a preferred product is because it's far more economical than other standard flooring materials, especially when specified in large expanses of spaces such as multifamily and commercial hospitality type projects, which leads us to one of the other major reasons. Vinyl is specified, and it's off because it's so versatile aesthetically. Like you can get it in a wood look, a stone look, and really in virtually any appearance that you're looking for. And while LVT like claims to be a durable material, it has a lot of flaws in how it holds up, especially in the long term. With its top wear and photographic layers, those are typically paper thin, and then there's layers of substrates underneath. So those paper thin layers can easily wear off, and LVT usually isn't like a color body through material like natural materials are, like wood, cork, bamboo, linoleum. And all of these are pretty much self-healing materials, and vinyl isn't. So once you scratch the product in any way, there's really no way to repair it. So here's a similar chart that we had for wall covering, and it's just talking about some of the alternatives that we often use and prefer to specify over vinyl products. And we're going to talk about how the different attributes compare to LVT and other PVC type flooring products. So the first one we're going to talk about is linoleum. It's one of our top all-time favorite flooring materials. And in terms of its cleaning and maintenance, it's very low maintenance in the way that LVT flooring is. It's a very long-lasting material. It has a much longer lifespan than products like LVT. And at the end of its life cycle, it's entirely biodegradable does. Linoleum is made out of natural renewable materials, a combination of linseed oil, rosin, and cork powder. So it doesn't emit VOCs. And in fact, it's actually a naturally antibacterial material. And in terms of durability, again, it's scratch resistant, water resistant, and it's a self-healing product. So it's very suitable for high traffic areas. And in terms of a cost perspective, linoleum is fairly cost effective and really more or less on par with the market rate for LVT. One of our favorite linoleum products is Forbo's Marmoleum. We've used this on many projects, and they have a variety of different colors aesthetically, and the product is incredibly sustainable. It has a health product declaration, and it's Declare Redlist free, and it's an incredibly durable product. It's famously installed in New York's Grand Central Station food court, and it's been there for decades, and it still looks like it's in great condition. So here's just a quick snapshot of the product life cycle of linoleum, and you can really see it's not as rigorous as it is to manufacture vinyl products, and at the end of its life, it's entirely compostable. Next, as we move into solid wood flooring, wood, as we all know, is incredibly durable, and really when comparing it to the lifespan of other materials, once you have wood installed in a space, you essentially have it there for life. So one of the products that we're really highlighting here is Caswell's end grain flooring, and Caswell's entire product line is FSC certified, and end grain specifically was a material that's historically used in factories and manufacturing facilities. So it really has an industrial grade durability to it. And I also just want to quickly show a life cycle of wood, again, far less rigorous than that of vinyl and even of linoleum. It can be composted or be used at the end of its life.
And if we go back one to the your guys' amazing graphic. I think Brianna had a question in the chat about the trade-off between the embodied carbon of, you know, healthy materials like cork or wool or wood, you know, that might come from hundreds of thousands of miles away. And I think 2 points to this that I know I've seen on my projects is that, like, this life cycle right here is so simple, right? Or if you have vinyl, it's very complicated and there's lots of transportation involved in that, right? Like from the ethylene cracking down in Louisiana, then it gets processed, you know, somewhere else, and then it's manufactured. And that can be a cross-continent journey. So a lot of the devils are in the details, especially if you like read through an EPD, for example. There's a lot of information there that can kind of help you think about it, that a lot of that on like a petrochemical side is hidden of how far it's traveling. And we're also seeing on projects that are pursuing ILFI zero carbon certification, where you have to track your carbon during your A4 and A5 process. We're seeing a lot of these issues come up for across materials. It's like, are you shipping it? Do you have a schedule issue? You will have to like freight it in by airplane. So I think that one way of kind of getting around that issue of like, oh, the carbon transportation impact is that if we think about transportation across all of our materials at the beginning of our projects, we can limit the embodied carbon across everything, because steel goes through the same way, you know, a lot of our facade materials and then our interiors. So applying that thinking to all our materials can kind of help with some of the questions that are like, oh, the wool can only come from.
Well, and the one thing that I'll add to that is, you know, a lot of the reason that these materials come from far away is because we don't incentivize them here in the United States. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's not as big of a demand for them here, whereas there is a large demand for these more sustainable products in Europe. And that's just the reality right now. It's sort of like the demand for solar power. You know, for a long time in the US, solar power or solar panels were only manufactured in China. And now, because finally the demand here has caught up, we are beginning to manufacture the necessary technology and materials for that here in the United States. And so the ideal is that we get to those points, and the more that we can, you know, search locally for materials that are made, if there are sheep farms, you know, locally that are made and we can use wool for those materials, you know, we'll absolutely do it. Wood is the material that we absolutely change the species, type of wood, everything that we will use depending on the geography of our projects. We wouldn't use a mesquite flooring in California, nor would we use it in Wisconsin, but we might use maple. We might use, you know, some of these other wood species that are common to those areas. So it is a balancing act. And the hope and the dream and the fight is always to get that manufacturing ramped up back here in the United States so that we can have more sustainable, you know, products and jobs here. So we're hoping for it for sure.
So this is actually a perfect segue to, since we're talking about embodied carbon, and carpet manufacturers are really ahead of the game in making sure that their products are recyclable and have low embodied energy through their use and procurement of their products. And when specified with the healthiest options for pile fibers and carpet backing, carpet can actually improve indoor air quality, and it really has minimum VOC emissions, and carpet tile circulates dust far less than a PVC or LVT flooring would. And while it's a different material in the traditional senses than a resilient flooring, it has the same durability attributes as an LVT, and it's easy to maintain and performs really well in high traffic settings. We use carpet in all of our higher ed projects, our library projects. And so here is a material assessment of carpet. A carpet tile has several different components that put it together, and the materiality of each of those can really affect the overall health and performance of the product. So most carpet tiles you'll find will be nylon, and nylon has excellent abrasion resistance and it's recyclable. Next in line would be wool. You might also find polyolefin and PET felt as pile fiber options, which while aren't hazardous materials are much less durable than nylon or wool would be. However, they're great options for carpet backing. Polyolefin is far more durable than PVC would be as a carpet backing option. You also want to avoid fly ash filler in addition to PVC because they make the carpet no longer recyclable. And PVC backing beyond the health hazards we discussed, because of its closed cell nature, can make the floor susceptible to mold growth. And I just wanted to put a material spotlight on interface carpet tile. If you go to the next slide. And we want to specifically highlight their recent incentive towards creating the world's first carbon negative carpet tile. And so their initiative goes beyond just carbon reduction, but designing something that gives back to a planet health. And they've created this carbon sequestering carpet tile using recycled content and bio-based materials in one of their new carpet backings, which minimizes carbon impact through its production. And when you're combining it with some of their nylon flooring pile fiber options, you're creating a carbon negative flooring solution for the space. Next, we have ceramic tile. And ceramic tile, while not made from renewable materials like some of the other products we looked at, is not made from petroleum or chlorinated materials the way that vinyl is. It's incredibly durable, and unlike PVC, it's suitable for use in wet areas like kitchens and restrooms where we often see it specified. It's easy to clean, and it comes in a variety of designs and colors in the same way that LVT does. It is recyclable and can be used in creating new ceramic products. When treated with the correct glazing and polishing products, it emits low VOC emissions. And a little spotlight to Crossville Tile. On the next slide, they're a US-based tile manufacturer, and their factory is located in Tennessee. And they have completely eliminated the use of toxic heavy metals in their tile glazes, which you'll commonly find in other leading tile manufacturers that are manufactured outside of the US. And these glazings tend to have traces of lead, arsenic, and other toxic materials. And so Crossville doesn't just simply purchase carbon credits, they're actually limiting the embodied carbon created during procurement and production to ensure that their product is carbon neutral. And here's just an overall comparison of the flooring materials we've talked about and some others, including rubber and cork flooring. So we recognize LVT is probably still one of the most affordable products on the market, but you can see overall how some of these other products compare in terms of their material health and durability and some of their other attributes. So lastly, just highlighting some PVC-free alternatives. We recognize LVT is often specified because it can easily give you that wood look, which is often specified in multifamily projects, even in hospitality and other commercial type project typologies. So we just wanted to highlight some products that we found while we've done our research, because we're always looking for alternatives that are PVC free. And so one of the first ones is this product from Shaw Contract. It's a rigid plank product with a mineral core substrate. Another one is Nature Plank HPD by Technofloor, which is a bio-based polyurethane flooring product, and they have a ton of colorways to choose from. And then another one is, which is also a polyurethane, bio-based polyurethane, like plank type product, is the In Tandem line from Shaw Contract. And we actually specified this on one of our recent projects that just had it's ribbon cutting, and it looks great. It looks and performs just the way an LVT product would.
Okay, another true or false. Phthalate-free vinyl is safe to specify. Okay, okay, false. Like we mentioned before, the additives, like stabilizers and plasticizers, we still need them in vinyl to function. So any kind of substitute right now, we just don't know what the health risks are. So it is not safe to specify.
So I'll go through very quickly just, how we start to, how we have this discussion with clients and with reps, our materials reps. And so we have, again, done a lot of research on this internally at our own firm. We have created one-pagers about the risks of vinyl, really diving very deep into the life cycle of vinyl, which again, Kathleen sort of alluded to. It's a lot different than that life cycle that Javaria went over about wood or carpet or linoleum, some of these other materials, and really highlighting, how we have, identified alternatives to these. And so distributing this to our clients, and even to our reps, telling them, blank, hard stop, we don't specify vinyl, please don't show it to us. That's pretty much where we go to with our discussion. Next. And then again, we've written a white paper about this topic, really done our research about all of the alternatives, about the real world impacts. This white paper we completed in 2021, I believe, and I think had peer reviewed in early 2022. So I'm sure at this point, even additional research has come out about vinyl as a material. And so, if a client or a rep, requests even additional information, we will send them this and we'll say, hey, we've done our homework on this topic and we're really serious about this. And then lastly, we want to talk about regrettable substitutions. So, thankfully, manufacturers are listening. They recognize the problem, and that's something to be championed. But we always want to continue to be skeptical about, any material that is chlorinated in nature. Chlorinated chemicals are a part of a family of chemicals which are notoriously hazardous. Agent Orange is a chlorinated chemical. And so we really want to, be very cognizant of anything that has that V in it. Hey, this is not, PVC. Okay, well then what does that V stand for? Can you break down the chemistry for us? And so those are questions we're always asking. You can see many manufacturers, we've taken their names off of this, but are coming out with vinyl product B, vinyl, reformulated vinyl, green vinyl. And when you really look at it, they might be free of phthalates, they might be free of formaldehyde, they might be free of heavy metals, but there's something else in there. Vinyl as a material alone cannot perform in that, pure powder form that it is created in the factory. It has to have additives. And unless we have full disclosure of what those additives are, we will not specify the product, and we urge our clients not to do so either.
Okay, that's the presentation. So I know Kathleen has a couple of questions for us, but if anybody else did too, we're always open to have a chat. And so here's our contact information, and feel free to reach out.
Thanks, y'all. And I think my first question is just like, how are you so awesome? Like, I have spent a lot of my career trying to map and simplify a lot of really tough chemistry stuff. And I really encourage folks, like the life cycle diagrams that these amazing folks have put together are super powerful and really help get to the heart of this. And this is what we need to be showing our clients if they've got an ESG program, and making that connection between ESG, the social impact, and how their purchasing decisions can be a risk to them, right? So I think all of the amazing stuff in this on these slides and like making the real recommendations. What manufacturers are you guys using? It's just amazing. What a wealth of knowledge. Thank you. About a couple of questions from me, and please folks also just like raise your hand or talk over me. We want to hear from the audience. But I guess my first question is that, you know, there's a lot here where if someone's just getting started out, they have a project that's in CDs and they're like, I'm inspired, but what do I do? You know, if you can't eliminate all of it, where do you guys prioritize your focus for the maximum impact? What's the first step for someone with the project right now who wants to take some action?
Sure. So I think there's priorities on the interior of a space, and there are priorities on the exterior of the space. With vinyl, we're concerned about indoor air quality, and we're also concerned about the exterior environmental health as well. In terms of the interior, where it is going to have the most tremendous effect on human health is at where it takes up the most surface area, and typically that's flooring. So if you want to target eliminating vinyl from any part of your building, it is unfortunately the most common place that you're going to find it on your projects, which is the floor. The floor surface is the one that is the most likely to be damaged. It will get nicked, it will get dented, and every time that happens, you are exposing even more of those chemicals to the indoor air quality. Also, as dust collects on that surface and then gets recirculated into the space, it's taking with it all of the additives that are sneaking out of that vinyl, again, because they don't chemically bond to the substrate of the material. So the number one place to target is your flooring. And I think that that's a really good conversation to have with your clients too, about what those health effects really are. Because if it's not carcinogens that are really going to convince your client, it might be endocrine disruptors. It could be the developmental toxins. And so, you know, really targeting those areas with your clients are important. On the exterior, where it has the most impact is going to be your roof. That's where potentially it's getting the most sunlight, where it, you know, is potentially getting the most damaged. And again, that is what causes, you know, that vinyl material to leach out even further into the environment. So targeting those areas where it takes up the most square footage is important.
Yeah, and I will add on the roofing side, like that's low hanging fruit when you have a product, an alternative product that's just as economical and performs just as well, and maybe better. That's an easy one to swap out on your specs.
So someone in the chat posted a comment about linoleum. So there are actually linoleum manufacturers in the US. So you might have to touch base with us after to check in with what they are. We do mostly use Forbo because we have found them to be the most sustainable company, but there are some linoleum companies that are manufacturing in the US and they are actually cheaper than Forbo is. They don't come in as many colors or patterns, but we can send that on to you, Kristen, if you send one of us an email. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Other questions? I've got one more and then I guess we'll wrap up. I mean, I think this work is incredible. You're saving lives. I think it just shows the power that as interior designers, I mean, how much oil, petrochemicals you guys reducing, you're playing your part in decarbonization just as much as a MEP engineer putting in a heat pump to replace gas boilers, right? So it's super important work. How are you guys as a company, as individuals, balance a big research project like this with all of your projects? You know, what is that infrastructure, organizational infrastructure that allows you to do this deep dive and like take y'all's passion and not lead to burnout? I'd love to hear that for myself, but also for other folks in the room.
I just have a little bit to add to say on that part, but I think Alyson and Javaria really have spearheaded the efforts on putting the white paper together and really catalyzing this effort into moving away from vinyl firm-wide. But we do allocate some of our fee to sustainability for each project. It hasn't really been leveraged yet to really, use that as your kind of research platform. But we have been making sure that each project has the capacity to do that. And so we're trying to bring this up to the forefront within our firm, saying, hey, you can start to use those in terms of evaluating, the quality of your building from embodied carbon, from health and wellness. Like, I think the past we've really focused on operational carbon, but that budget should be used to also look at other aspects of the building that are, focused on sustainability.
Yeah, I think we're very fortunate that we work for an architecture firm that takes this topic very seriously and has a goal, right, to be a firm that is known for dedicating time and effort to researching sustainability and implementing it in projects. And so I think advocating, for your architecture firms to do the same is really important. And in terms of burnout, it's a great actually side project to be able to work on. It gets you excited. It gets you out, wanting to wake up in the morning, and go to work because you're excited to be able to talk with, your colleagues who are excited and passionate about this topic. It does make you hopeful to be able to see change happening in the industry. And so I actually think that it makes us more excited and more dedicated to our full-time projects to be able to have these, side gigs within our firm to be able to research this stuff.
I love it. It's a retention strategy, right? Like people want to do this work. It's awesome. I mean, that's what I'm gonna tell my boss. So thanks for that call out. That's helpful. Other questions? We've got some specific questions and the links about different products. Oh, I guess it's time though. I think we need to call it. But you guys have their all of their emails. Please follow up. Their fount of knowledge. I mean, you can see how quickly they can answer your questions and get you some solutions. So thank you, ladies, for your time. Such an impressive presentation. Just thank you for doing your part. It really helps our industry, and we're so grateful to have you guys. All right, thanks everyone for attending. Thank you, AILA.
Yeah.
See you guys.
Yeah. Thanks,
Thank
Kathleen.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you very much.
Hi.
Bye-bye.
For some reason you want to speak. I'll double check the side.